Hello there, today I'm going to show you the Bright Bobbles Folktales square, which is this one here, and this is the pattern. Now I had some issues with that because I followed the pattern in the chart where you go 2 rows below to make your puff stitch, and this is what the puff stitch looks like following the pattern going in 2 rows below, but it didn't look like the picture. If you look at the picture, you can only see 3 rows between each of the bobbles, so you can see there's a ridge there which is the top of the stitch, and then a ridge there which is 2 rows on, and then the bobble seems to go into the one between these 2 ridges. And if you compare it to following the pattern, you've got 2 clear ridges. So I decided that they were expecting you to go into further down, so I changed as I went further up, and here this seems to match the pattern much better. You can see there's, I don't know if you can see that there, but you've got 1 full repeat and then another row, and that's what you have here, a full repeat and then 1 row. So I'm going to show you how to do both sorts of bobbles, and you will need 4 markers just to help you keep these stitches in the right place. Okay, so the start of the square is the same as the twists and trebles, and it is 26 chain, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Now I have gone up a hook size. I'm on a 5mm to get the 6-inch square. I was a bit small, so when you make your first square, check it before you cut the yarn, and then you might need to go up or down a hook size. So first 2 rows are double crochet into each stitch, so working from the second one from the hook, so skip this one and double crochet, and you again, like the twists and trebles, you only need to go into the top of the stitch, you don't need to go through 2 loops of the chain. So all the way along to the end, 1 into each stitch of your chain, have a quick count to make sure you've got 25, and then 1 chain and come back. I shall meet you back here. Okay, so I've now done 2 rows of double crochet. I did say confidently in the last video, the twists and trebles, that it is curly, but it will sort itself out as time goes on and you have more of the square made. Now that is the case for the test square that I did, but that was in acrylic yarn, whereas this is in the West Yorkshire Spinners yarn, and it keeps its curl, so it will need blocking. So just a bit of a steam with an iron just held above it will flatten it out beautifully, as you can see from this. So row 3. This is the row that we're going to use to set up the markers, so that we know that when we get to round 5, which is where you make the puff stitch, so you know where to put your hook. So this is where you're going to need your markers. So you'll need 3 for this row, and then you obviously need 4 for the rows where there are 4 bobbles. So you have 6 stitches and the bobble is on the 7th. So here we're going to work 6 double crochet, so 1 chain to turn, and then 6 double crochet into the next 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the next one is the one that we're going to mark, so if you work the stitch and just pull the yarn up so it doesn't drop out, and you're going to mark this stitch. You don't want to mark the top, you want to go in just to the right of the legs of the stitch and mark it through the top of the next row below, and this will all become apparent when we get to row 5. So into the right of the legs and then underneath the legs into the top of the previous row. I hope you can see that. And just lock your marker. So then there's 5 stitches between each bobble, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this next stitch is where your bobble's going to be, so work the stitch, pull your yarn up a little bit, pop a marker in to the right of the legs and out underneath. And then another 5 double crochet in between bobbles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this next stitch is the one where we're going to be making the bobble, so work the stitch, pop the marker in, same as before, and then work to the end. You should have 6 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's lovely. It's really nice when you have the number of stitches you were expecting. Three, 4, 5, 6. So 1 chain, and then you're just going to double crochet into the top of all of the stitches along the way back, and because of the way you've put the marker in, you're not, the marker's not in the way, so you can get into that stitch quite easily. So I will show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the stitch that's got the markers underneath, you can just wiggle in, and then just work your way down, and I shall meet you back ready for the beginning of row 5. Right, now here we are ready for the beginning of row 5 and the puff stitches. These can be a bit tricky, so I shall try and give you some hints so that they work more easily. So I've done my 1 chain, so 6 double crochet, and then we're at the marker. So now according to the pattern you're going into the top of row 3, and this was row 3. So if you want to follow the pattern, then you would go into the top of your marker. But if you want the square to look like the picture, you're going to be going in to the bottom of the marker. And that is what I have done. So it's yarn over, and then in where the bottom of the marker is, take the marker out and pull through, and then you need to take it up to the level of the row that you're on. And now this is the most important bit. When you make all of the other, because it's 5 half trebles that you don't sort of part worked, you need them all to be at the same height. If any of them are loose, you'll catch your hook when you're trying to pull through all 11 loops that are on the hook. So that's your first one, 2, and then pull it up. You can pull quite hard to make sure that they're all the same length. So that's 1, 2, 3, again, pull it up firmly, 4, pulled up firmly, 5, pulled up firmly. Now this bit does not always work, and you do find that you end up making quite a lot of these, having to pull them out and start again. So yarn over. Then if you turn your hook so that the hook part is facing down, you don't want it sideways like that because it will catch. You want it straight down, and then hopefully, yes, it will come all the way through, and then lock the puff stitch in place. Now when you come back, you're only going to be working this stitch of the puff stitch, you're not going to be working that one. So pop your marker back in to the second stitch from the hook. This is the stitch that you will not be working on the way back, and again it's just useful so that you know where you are. So then we've got 5 double crochet to the next puff stitch. So if you look, there'll be one hidden behind the puff stitch, and then it's the next one you can see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're ready for the next puff stitch. So again, as long as you do the same thing each time, you can either go into the top of the marker or the bottom of the marker. So yarn over, into the mark stitch, pull through, bring it up to the level of your row, yarn over, and a sharp tug to get it the same height. 3, 4, and this sometimes happens that the stitch twists. If that happens, you will never get the closing stitch through, so drop it off. So that should be 4 stitches, so you should have 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I lost 2, so that's 3 stitches, 4, 5. So it should look very even, and no twists showing at the front. So yarn over, turn your hook so that it's facing down, and slide it through and lock off, and then pop your marker into the second stitch from the hook as the stitch that you won't be using. So 5 double crochet, yarn over into the marked stitch, marker out, yarn over and bring it up to the level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over your hook, turn the hook facing down and slide it up through and lock it into place. Marker back into the second stitch from the hook, and then it's just 6 double crochet to the end of the row. Okay, so that was the end of row 5, and you've got all your markers on the top to show you the stitches that you're not going into. So we're going to turn, and you're going to work double crochet into each of the double crochet and the top of the puff stitch, skip the marked stitch and then double crochet along, skip the marked stitch on all the way back to the beginning. Five, 6, into the top of the puff stitch. Be careful not to, or try not to snag any of the puff stitch strands. Marker out, skip that stitch and straight into the top of the next double crochet. And you don't notice, there's no gap, as you can see. So I shall meet you back at the beginning. Okay, so that was the end of row 6. Now you know the right side because your yarn tail will be on the left hand side of your work, so that's how you know you're on the right side row. So the pattern is the same as what we've done so far. So you're going to work 2 more rows of double crochet, and then on the 3rd row we're going to set the markers for the 4 bobble row. So work 2 more rows of double crochet, 1 into each stitch, 1 chain, turn and come back. Occasionally check your stitches to make sure you've got 25, because it's a shame when you get to the bobble row and realise that you're slightly out of kilter. Okay, so I shall meet you back here in 2 rows. Okay, so we're up to row 9, and row 9 is setting the markers for the puff stitch on row 11. As you see from the pattern, it's 3 stitches in, so you're going to work 4 stitches, put a marker in, work 6 stitches, put a marker in, 6 stitches, marker, 6 stitches, marker, and you should have 3 in the end. So I know using markers isn't much fun, but it does save a certain amount of heartache further along the line, because you know you're getting your puff stitch in the right place and always in the same place. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is where the puff stitch is going to be. Pop your marker in. And then work 6, put a marker in the 6th stitch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the marker always goes in to the right of the legs of the stitch, and then out underneath the V of the stitch. Okay, so you just carry on with that. So finish marking up this row, double crochet all the way back, and I shall meet you back here and I'll show you the bobbles one more time and then you'll be good to go. Right, now we're ready for the bobbles on round 11. So 1 chain, work 3 double crochet, and then the bobble into the 4th. So yarn over, and again if you're making the smaller bobbles you go into the top, if you're making the larger bobbles you go into the bottom. To height, yarn over, there's 2, and always make sure that you're pulling them up to the same height. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over and through and lock, and mark the second stitch from the hook as the one that you're not going to work. So you're going to repeat that, work 5 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, popcorn stitch into the 6th stitch. So you have 4 not popcorn stitches, puff stitches these, aren't they? Puff stitches on this row, and then you're going to come back working double crochet into each of the double crochet, skipping the marked stitch. So then you're going to repeat that. So when you finish that you'll be up to here. You work 2 rows of double crochet. On the 3rd row you set your markers for the next puff stitch, come back, so you've marked your puff stitches on the right side, come back, on the next row you'll make your puff stitches, 2 rows of double crochet, next row mark your puff stitch, come back, work your puff stitches, come back, work 2 rows, mark the row, puff stitch, and then when you've done the last row of puff stitches, come back and then you work 3 rows of double crochet, 1, 2, 3, so you'll be at this corner, and this is where I shall meet you once you've done all of your puff stitches for the border. Okay, so here we are, ready to complete the border. Now the pattern we've worked rows 1 to 32, and then we've worked the beginning of round 33, which the border, if you were to start as you would normally at the beginning of a right side row, the border runs along the top, down the side, along the bottom, up the side, and then back along the top. So I've just left us with 4 sides of the square to do. So starting at the top left hand corner, you're going to chain 2, and then you're going to work into 3 of every 4 rows. So you can't really get into this one. So your first row is the last but one, so you're heading into this. You can see the legs of the row that you've just done, and you're going to go into the bottom of those legs. So 1, and then if you just give it a little tug you can see each row, because you can see the hole, you're working around the double crochet. So 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to skip 1 and then into the next 3. 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, and then when you get to here you're going to skip 1 and you should have 4 rows left. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to enter each of those. So skip 1, because you'll have done 7 sets of 3, which is 21, and you need 4 more to make 25 along each side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're ready to do the bottom border. This is trickier because this is you're working into the chain from when you first set it up. And if you look at if you tip the work towards you, you can see the stitches that you're going to be working into. But because it's a chain, the back of this stitch there is the front of this stitch here. So when you've worked into a stitch like that, when you tip it towards you, it's going to look as if you've worked into this stitch. So you need to keep the work tipped towards you so you know you're going into the right stitch. So it's the end of the side, and then you want to 2 chain, and then tipping it forward, working into the first stitch. You can see the stitch there. You're going to work into both strands. Now the next stitch, as I said, if you hold it flat on, you're going to feel you've gone into that stitch, but if you tip it towards you, you'll see that this is the front of the stitch, which was the back of the one you've worked. You're going into that and then into the back. And keep a count of these, because this is the row that's easiest to make a mistake on. So again, tip it towards you and into both parts of the chain. Once you get used to it, you'll know you're going to be going into the one that looks like you've already worked it and picking up the back. So all the way along, and as I said, keep a count, because you need to have 25 along here. But keep tipping it towards you to make sure you're getting both strands of the yarn. Okay, and I shall meet you at the end, and you should have got 25 stitches along the bottom edge. Okay, so you should now have 25 stitches along the bottom. If you haven't, if you hold it up, you'll probably be able to see the stitch that you missed, if you've missed a stitch, and you'll know where to pull it back to and pick up the right number. So along the side, which is the same as the first side we did, 2 chain, and then you're working 3 of every 4 of the rows. So 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, all the way along to the end, and then when you get to the last you should have 4 to go into 1, 2, 3, 4, because that will be a skipped stitch. So I shall meet you here, and you again make sure you count your stitches, and you've got 25. And now we're on to the final side, which is the top. So again, 2 chain to turn the corner, and 1 double crochet into each stitch until you get to the end, again counting as you go, 1, 2, etc. And then when you get to the first corner that you made, the first 2 chain, you slip stitch into the chain space. So just carry on. One double crochet into each of the stitches. This is a very nice straightforward row, and I shall meet you at the end. So here we are at the end of the square, and it's just 1 slip stitch into the last stitch, and I don't have my scissors with me, so I'm not cutting the end off. And there you go, there's the finished square. It will need a light steam and block to make it flatten out. I did give it a quick steam once I'd got to about there, just so it was flat enough to show you to work with. So there you go, and I hope you enjoy making the bright bobbles.